You're listening to the Naptime Empires Podcast with my mom, Nikki Elledge Brown. Mom, your show's on.
Thanks, bud. I got it from here. Welcome to the Naptime Empires Podcast, refreshingly honest conversations on the realities of parenthood and entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Nikki Elledge Brown. Let's get started. All right, in true Naptime Empires fashion, I actually recorded almost an entire episode and then Deacon woke up screaming in the other room and I had to pause and I lost my train of thought. And so now I'm starting all over while he's in the car with his daddy as they go pick up Big Brother from kindergarten. Here's what I want to talk about today. Repetition and how we tend to discount our message. It's like right under our noses. One nose, individual nose, it's right under your nose, but you're discounting it because it comes so naturally to you. You're saying it all the time. You're sharing it with your clients. You're sharing it with your best friends, maybe even to your kids. You hear yourself saying it all the time. Maybe your clients have now started repeating it back to you. It's there. It's like right under your nose. So the funny thing is my last solo episode was about finding your message, and then the one before that and using your voice and all of these things. What I realized as I just scribbled down a bunch of names when I scrolled back through iTunes and I scribbled down the titles of all of these various solo episodes that I've done, it's just a meta example of my case in point, because I have said the same thing over and over from various angles with different stories attached to it. But everything that I'm sharing today to prove my point that repetition is okay and actually a good thing and literally what you're meant to be doing is the same thing that you're sharing over and over anyway. It's all evidenced here in this podcast. So one example of one thing that I've said a lot that I'm still repeating again is this whole do it for you idea. And the idea that whenever I'm recording these podcasts, for example, I want to be in an inspired place. I'm only pressing record if I feel like this is an insight or a story or an aha moment or just something that I want to anchor in and save for later for myself and for you. And I do tell you that, right? I say I'm speaking directly to you, but I'm also speaking to me. And the cool thing is when we do that, when we're like planting those seeds in the minds of our dreamies and our friends, then it's easy recall for them to repeat back to us when we need it, right? So it's like, can you hold my purse? Like, hold my purse for a second. So it's like, can you hold this message for a second? Because I know whatever I'm saying, I need to hear it too, right? It goes back to the whole idea of we teach what we most need to learn. So one of my strongest examples of this is whenever I said it doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be shared. And that's what people constantly, if I was even on Twitter, I mean, technically I am, but I'm not really, you know what I mean? But when people used to tweet, they would tweet that. Or if it's an Instagram post or something that really resonated with people, I love and appreciate that because that's what I need to hear, right? So think about, as I'm talking, I want you to be thinking about what are these things that you say so much that if you were like a pull string doll, it's like, oh yeah, that's so you know, whenever you say it, there's a reason for that. It is like hardwired into you. And there's a reason, and I just want you to be paying attention to it, which ties into the whole idea of divine breadcrumbs, which I've also talked about in previous episode and pretty much every interview that I've ever done, which is the point and the whole idea of connecting the dots, you know, like taking a pause, looking back and reflecting on the divine breadcrumbs that have always been leading you to this path. Even if they didn't seem connected at the time, now that you have 20/20 hindsight, you're looking back and you're like, oh, it did seem unrelated, like the whole college level teaching and then the park ranger gig and then this, that, or the other, the sales job or whatever it is. But then you start to notice this golden thread, right? Again, I want you to just play along with me as I'm talking and think about what are those divine breadcrumbs, because it's like if you really think about it and you think about what are the things that your best friends are texting you for, or what are the things that your dreamies are coming and asking you for advice on, what are the conversations that you get lost in? You're like, oh my gosh, I love to talk about this stuff. I could talk about it all day. These are the things that you're meant to be sharing. And it seems like it's too easy. Again, I have a whole nother episode on that, which is Dear Overthinker, Let It Be Simple. or something like that. But that's another point that I need to hear all the time and that my friends need to hear all the time. So I'm always being like, yeah, well, you don't actually have to complicate it that much, right? And so this is the thing with our messages, we're overcomplicating it and we're looking for it as if it's like out there somewhere and arm's length away. And it's literally right in front of your face. It's what comes naturally. It's literally the stuff that you love to talk about, that you find yourself, that people come to you for regularly, that you enjoy. Sometimes there are things people come to you for and you're annoyed. You're like, Google it, right? But the stuff that you actually love to share and to pour into people, that's for a reason. And you might even think, well, yeah, but isn't that the same thing for everyone? No, it's actually not. There is something special about the way that you share that message. Again, going back to another Naptime Empires episode on why your voice matters. And we talk about that little triangle that I first saw or heard of through Scott Hoffman, where it's the message, the messenger, and the moment. Meaning that you may have heard any or all of these exact messages from me at some point, but maybe today it's landing for you in a different way because it's a different moment, which is why you have permission to say it again. You can literally say that again, because even if somebody's heard it from you at another time and date in history, it's going to land with them differently today. It's going to resonate differently today because they've had different experiences. They're in a different situation and context, and it's going to just affect a different type of change because you're repeating yourself. Or because you are repeating it in a slightly different way because you have a different experience or a different example, and this time it's going to actually sink in. Okay, the other thing I want to say, when you're thinking about the divine breadcrumbs and connecting the dots, is that if you want to connect the dots, first you have to draw a dot. And I also talked about that in a previous episode because I was talking about, I think it was the one where I was talking about breaking through resistance. This was also relevant and something that I needed to hear today. You know, some people are like, I never want to listen to my stuff, my podcast or my video or whatever. Like, I can't stand it. I'm like, I actually like listening to my podcasts. Is that weird? I don't care. Because I do. Because like I said, I'm recording it so that I can hear it. It's like a mental note, a note to self that I can save for later if I need it. I don't listen to my own podcast all the time, but I have listened to a few episodes over the last couple of months that I'm like, I needed to hear that because it's literally me verbally processing myself through some ish. For example, this breaking through resistance episode. And it's funny because in that episode, I was talking about how it had been maybe like a week and a half. It was during season 1 when I was doing 2 episodes a week, a solo episode and a conversation episode. And I needed to sneak in a solo episode before the next conversation episode went live. And I was talking about my friend Suze and her design days back at Kate Spade, where it would be like, okay, she's designing a handbag, but to start, just draw a dot. Like, do something that's so stupid easy that it's just, okay, yeah, of course I can draw a dot, you know? What I want to share with you in this moment on that message is when you're looking back for your divine breadcrumbs to kind of see what are the things, like what are these things that do come naturally to you, that seems to be the message that's been sticking with you for all these years. Like, to connect the dots, you have to draw the dot. And to draw the dot, again, going back to another Naptime Empires episode, do you see the point of what I'm saying and how I feel like this is just so obvious that you just miss it? The drawing the dot thing can be tied back to the episode where I talk about the difference between you and them. And the difference between you and the people who are out there doing the darn thing, it's literally a decision that they made to do the darn thing. In this case, to press record and record this episode. You won't have any dots to connect if you don't take action. And you're not going to take action unless and until you decide to do it. Because that's how you're going to have the dots to connect. You know what I mean? Like if you're literally just staying stuck and frozen in overthinking mode and trying to think your way into clarity, then you're not going to have the dots to connect. But if you just kind of throw yourself out there and know, winky, winky, it doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be shared, you're going to have some dots that you can play with. And yeah, there's going to be some outliers that are like, ooh, remember that time? And it's like a wild card, and maybe it doesn't relate to the dots, but there was some kind of great story that went with it, or something that you learned from it, always happening for your highest good. But when you make the decision to do the thing, to draw the dot, to use your voice and to find your voice by using your voice, which is another one that I talked about, how to find your voice, my 2-year-old, and how he just babbles on, and that's how he's discovering his voice, because he's just using it. He doesn't worry that it's not clear or that we don't know exactly what he's saying. He's just going for it. Do you see what I'm saying here? This is what I mean. I'm thinking out loud because I literally just went through iTunes and I was just scribbling down names of all these different episodes that I've done. And I'm just realizing that none of them are actually that different. And when I think about my first book, I mean, seriously, message me somewhere and be like, Nikki, I really need to read your first book. So I really need you to get over yourself and put it out there. Because I've always wanted to write books, not even just one, like multiple books. So that's why I really need to get the first one out so I can unclog the pipe and just get it going. But I've always been overthinking. Again, hello, we teach what we most need to learn. I've always been overthinking what the first one's going to be about. And then I've literally been told, look, you're doing it. You're creating it as you let this inspiration come through you in your solo episodes. Like, this is the kind of stuff that needs to go in your book. So it's also really funny because I was voxing my friend Carrie and I was like, if you asked higher Carrie, what's the book that Nikki wrote that you're celebrating with her and reading? You know, what is it? And she's like, it's the pep talks. It's the permission to just go for it. And I'm like, I totally know that. I know that. And yet, for some reason, there's this part of me that wants to make it harder than that. Like, no, it needs to be more complicated or something that I need to research. And then again, I just keep coming back to it. It's like a spiral. And I'm finally closing in on it where I'm actually going to start taking action on it. I can feel it. But it's like, it is the stuff that we need to share with our best friends when they're having a down day or whatever it is, and they come to us and they need whatever it is that they come to us for, that then again, they hold it for us and then repeat it back to us whenever we need it. It can literally be that simple. There's so much value in that. And you're doing it for you, right? Because you're doing it for, like, whatever this book is that I'm going to write. I'm writing it for me because I'm writing it for them. I feel like whatever this book's going to be, what the book gonna be? Uh-oh. I don't know if you know that song, but I think of that a lot when I'm thinking about what my book's gonna be. But I think about how I want to write this book for me because I go back to that Liz Gilbert quote from Big Magic. And it's like, you can tell by the looks on the faces of the people reading it, like, please don't try to save us, basically, is what she talked about. When she was writing Eat, Pray, Love, she wasn't writing it to like help save a generation of women and going and finding themselves. She was just writing the book that she needed. And so that's what I want to do. It's kind of the balance, because you can trick yourself and be like, yeah, I'm writing it for me, because you know that by writing it for you, it's going to help other people. Just like the podcast. I'm using this channel as a place to express and share whatever I'm finding interesting or inspiring or whatever at the moment. And as I'm doing it, I'm getting the feedback from you that's like, ooh, that's exactly what I needed to hear. Yes, thank you for sharing that. So I'm like tricking myself. It's kind of like when we talk about being selfish as moms. It's like, you can say you're being selfish because you really know that ultimately, of course, you're going to be taking care of whoever, like your kids. You're going to make sure that they are loved and fed and cared for and safe to the degree that you can as a human. You know what I mean? So I feel like it's kind of the same thing with your creative work, where you're giving yourself permission to be selfish, wink, wink, and do it for you because logically, that it is going to benefit your dreamy as well. Is it going to benefit everyone? No. Is it going to be for everyone? No. Doesn't have to be, doesn't need to be. And if you try to do that, then it's probably going to suck. So to be like in terms of making it and the end result as well. So that's just what I've been thinking about today. And I just find it really interesting, but also really exciting. And I wanted to think through it out loud with you because I see and know, again, right? Mirror, mirror. So many amazingly talented humans out there who are trying to make it look a certain way or make it feel like, we just tend to default to feeling like we need to feel like performing monkeys and that it needs to be harder than it actually needs to be. Not that it's not going to take effort, not that it's always going to be easy, but I do feel like there is so much value in paying attention to what comes naturally to us. And yours may not be a message, like you may not feel called to speak, right? And that kind of thing. I do. And I know, I mean, naturally, I tend to attract people who want to speak and write and share and build community and connection and that kind of thing. And so if that's you and you find yourself spinning your wheels, feeling frustrated, like, Who am I? How do I be myself? Like, what is my message? I just want you to really think about this. Everything that I just said, like I said, going back and connecting the dots in my own stuff, I want you to go back and connect the dots of your stuff and see what is the message. Maybe it's very similar to mine. And by all freaking means, do it. Because again, some people are not going to hear, I'm not saying like copy my work or anything, but follow your own inner voice and your inspiration, because even if your message is similar to whatever mine is, some people are only going to hear it from you. They're not going to hear my podcast unless you tell them about it. They're not going to hear the whole story on perfectionism, or they might hear mine overcoming perfectionism stories as they come up, and it's not going to resonate with them in the way that yours would. Again, I sometimes feel weird repeating myself, but like I said, that's actually what I'm realizing is that that's what we need to do. That's when you find yourself repeating yourself over and over again, it's because, hello, honey, you've found your message. You're sharing your message. It's no coincidence that these are the things that I have felt most inspired and excited to document, to share with you, and to speak into your earbuds. So that's your homework this week, and I'd really love to hear about it in the playground, whatever's coming up for you as you're listening to this. And just to know that if you feel like a broken record, you feel like you're saying the same thing over and over again in a way that feels good, not in a way that's like, well, yeah, I'm saying the same thing because I feel like a performing monkey and I'm trying too hard to say this thing. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. I'm talking about the stuff that you love to talk about, that comes very naturally to you, that your friends come to you for, that your dreamies love you for. Those are the things. It's not an accident. It's not a coincidence. It is baked into you. This is what you're meant to share, whether that's your sole business model in terms of being a messenger and a speaker or a writer or whatever you want to call it, whether it's like the whole kit and caboodle or it's just a slice of it, it's meant to come through you. Your voice matters. Again, I have a whole episode on that. I've probably said again 50,000 times in this episode, but isn't that appropriate for an episode on repetition? Repeating a word that kind of relates to repetition again. Okay, that's all I wanted to share with you. Let me know if that even makes sense. I do always question myself pretty much every time after I'm done talking. I'm like, should I even upload that to Dropbox? And I know I've said that before too, but that's the point. I want to give you permission to be a broken record on the stuff that you're excited about, because we will need to hear it over and over again. I also feel like there's just so much fun in listening back to, if you're actually sharing whatever you are inspired by at the moment, it's fun to listen back. It's kind of like flipping back through a scrapbook, you know? And it's funny that whenever I was asking Carrie, what's the book? Can you just tell me, like, what's the book? What do you see, you know, as the book, the first one? And it's funny, as I messaged her and I was listening to my podcast on breaking through resistance, or maybe it was the divine breadcrumbs. Either way, I was listening to a podcast, and in that podcast, I was talking about the divine dinner roll that got thrown at my face whenever we were on a live online extravaganza celebrating Carrie's book launch, and how one of her team members, Jess, was like, hey, Nikki, just one last question. What's your favorite book that you've ever read on motherhood and entrepreneurship? And I was like, oh, because all the people in the chat, almost everyone else on that live stream had been an author. And so everyone in the chat was like, what's Nikki's book? Not everyone in the chat, that's an exaggeration, but a lot of people, several people were like, wait, what was the name of Nikki's book again? What was the name of her book again? And I was like, oh my gosh. And when that was her last question before we signed off, I was like, I just got to do it, right? The difference between you and them, it's just a decision. It's a decision to do it. So I am excited to one day listen back to this episode and be like, that's when I realized that I was making it way harder than it needed to be. I just needed to let it come through me. That's always and only our job. And all that to say, I really hope that there's some kind of spark that's going off in your mind, because I know that there's value in your message and in the way that only you can share it. And I know that it can be scary to put yourself out there and blah, blah, blah. But part of what I love to talk about is to help you get over yourself and know that somebody really needs to hear it, and they're only going to hear it if you share it. So all that to say, tell me more. Tell me what it did spark for you over in the playground. I look forward to sharing a whole lot of amazing conversations coming your way. Again, once I get over myself, now that I've got this solo one out of the way, I can record intros for these conversations that I've been having as part of season 2 that I'm really excited to share with you. There's lots of goodness coming up. So get excited about that and start collecting and noting your divine breadcrumbs and the message that you love to share. And just let yourself know, wow, this can actually be it. It may seem super obvious or super simple. And if it does, honestly, that's it. That's the message. All right, cheering you on. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Talk to you next time. This show may be over, but the conversation is just beginning. Head on over to naptimeempires.com/Facebook so you can join my free... Wait, did I say free? I meant priceless, rapidly growing community of Naptime Empire builders for deeper discussions, behind-the-scenes scoop, and of course, updates whenever I've got new stuff coming up for you. naptimeempires.com/Facebook. See you there.
See you next time. Thanks for listening.